Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. Today, we're going to talk about the three pillars of retention or the retention blueprint. Really excited to have you here with us today, and we have got an awesome lineup of panelists for you who are actually leading the charge nationwide on their military student retention, and some of the programs that they offer are top-notch. So super excited to share some of their best practices and student experience with you guys today. So hopefully you take a lot of information from what we have to share with you. If you have any questions in the chat, feel free to throw them into the chat, and then we'll answer them as we go along. All right, so without further ado, let's get started. My name is Kayla Lopez, and I am the VP of Memberships here with Military Friendly. I work on the program development side, taking the data from the Military Friendly survey to help develop strategic initiatives and resources for you as an institution to find success quickly. And then we have two very exciting panelists with us today from the University of Tennessee, Knoxville, one of which has a really cool name. No offense, Kevin, but Tom Cruise. You may be thinking of a different Tom Cruise, but this Tom Cruise is awesome. And Tom Cruise serves as the Director of Veteran Success at the Director of the Veteran Success Center at the University of Tennessee, Knoxville. That is a mouthful, guys. As a director, Tom plays a key role in ensuring the success of all of his military and veteran students. He's involved in overseeing a range of different support services, as well as different programs and pillars that help those students find success. His responsibilities include developing and implementing best practices that enhance both academic and holistic transition. Cruz, you were in the Air Force. He's an Air Force veteran, served 6 years as a crew chief on an F-16, so that's exciting. Holds an Associate's of Arts in Business from Ashford University and a Bachelor's of Science in Communications and a Master's of Science in Educational Psychology, both from UT. Welcome, Tom. We're really
thank you very much.
Here.
Great to be here.
And our second panelist that we have with us today is Kevin Ho. Kevin is an Army veteran and a student leader at UT. He's pursuing his degree in their business college. After serving the Army, the 10th Mountain Division, Kevin transitioned into civilian life and found a renewed purpose in higher education. And he has been an advocate for the military students within his university and nationwide. So really excited to have him with us and pick his brain on things that we could all be doing better. He is also serves as the president of the student SBA chapter within his school, and serves with all different organizations throughout the community. Kevin serves as senator of the Student Government Association, advocating for policies that support military and veteran students and the broader student body. He wears many hats and many leadership roles within that institution. He's also the Tennessee Veteran of the Year, as well as the National Veteran of the Year in Education. So hats off to you, Kevin. We are super excited to have you here with us today.
Thank you, Kayla. I really appreciate it. Thank you for having me here today, and I look forward to it.
We do too. We're going to pick your brain. You may regret that when we're done. All right. So the three pillars. First is financial trust. And I'm just going to talk a little bit about what that means, right? And why that's important to some students and things that we can do as institutions to make that process a little easier, right? It gets a little complicated, and sometimes the rules for the benefits that military and veteran students have to follow or oblige to is very different than the normal student population. And so just going over some of those things on how we can create trust and a little bit more confidence in that financial piece. Second is operational agility, right? So how flexible is your program, right? And that's really what's going to lead to retention, is being able to look at those circumstances, being able to look at each situation and make adjustments as you go. And then infrastructure, right? So if you're going to have a personalized experience, you do have to have infrastructure behind that, so that you keep everything in order. All right, so let's bounce into the next side and talk a little bit about the financial trust. All right, so this talks a little bit about compliance and a lot about the financial trust situation. So the DoD MOU is important, right? This is an agreement that you would sign with the DoD directly that promotes the success and policies that you should have in place when working with military students or accepting TA, which is the tuition assistance program. So 96% of the military-friendly schools do have a DoD MOU in place. And for the 4% that don't, it's likely because they do not accept tuition assistance. at that university. As far as the VA Principles of Excellence, this is a Safe Harbor Act, right? So these are sort of the guidelines or the baseline things that you need to do as an institution so that your military students can find success. So we have 94% of the military friendly schools, which is a really high number compared to the 52,000 that accept GI Bill funding, that follow those VA Principles of Excellence, have it signed, some even have it framed at their university. And then 88% comply with the Veterans Choice and Accountability Act. And this is basically looks at tuition and in-state tuition rates for military students, along with a few other things. And so we'll get into the specifics of that. But without further ado, I want to kind of pick Kevin's brain a little bit. So, Kevin, when you started your transition and you chose UT is your choice of higher education. If you were to look at these pillars or look at the financial process within the university, is there anything that you would have done differently or wish that was in place that could have made that process easier or simpler for you from the very beginning?
Well, thank you, Kayla. So in my instance, I guess my introduction to higher education was a little bit irregular compared to most military affiliated students. I found out relatively late through the process that I got accepted about 15 days before the window. And, for me during that time period, it was a lot of anxiety, a lot of unsureness, and just trying to figure it out was very difficult on my end. Um, for me, I never really had an issue about, you know, financial trust as far as, the clarity of if the GI Bill was going to cover my entire education or not. I was able to get linked in with the Veteran Success Center, and they practically helped me as far as getting me up to speed, as far as communicating with the bursar's office, figuring out scheduling my classes, everything along the lines like that. So, at institutions like at the University of Tennessee, I think financial clarity is oftentimes not is really first impression that what military students would have when they come to the institution. They're aware of what their education is going to be. The bursar's office is very clear about it, and in-state tuition rates to all military affiliated students is quite a benefit. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Sometimes that's not the case, right? Even though, you may have in-state tuition rates, the cost of college may exceed that, or the cost of attending a university may exceed that. And so with that being said, there's something called like the Yellow Ribbon Program, and I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with it. But beyond sort of that federal compliance benchmark, the Yellow Ribbon Program really allows institutions to go above and beyond, right? And say that we want to embrace students at our university without there being a financial barrier involved. So Tom, does UT offer any specific financial counseling or anything that can help students maximize their benefits while they're there, as well as explain, if they are leveraging the Yellow Ribbon Program, what that would cover? How do you guys go about doing that?
Yeah, I think from my experiences, I came to UT myself as a student and navigating the GI Bill first, and then transitioning in that, the amount of support and the different integrations that have been created just over the past few years has been incredible. I think that immediately, as soon as a student veteran or any military connected is admitted to the University of Tennessee, we pick up the phone. We have that admissions list. We pick up the phone and we start making phone calls immediately, basically reaching out to say, "Hey, we're here. We're here to support you. How can we initially help?" But outside of that, as students are starting to get experiences with their orientation, they're starting to get more connection, more contact from the university. They have a system, they call it Vol 101. So it's similar to like, a lot of institutions do something like an online orientation. So this is one of the very first things that all students will interact with is Vol 101. But with our veteran and military connected students, all they have to do is click a yes, I'm veteran military affiliated, and it takes them to a whole different section that starts going into all the different services and things that the University of Tennessee offers. But on top of that, also about specifics of the GI Bill. This is what you're going to be looking at for that first semester. These are the things that the GI Bill may not cover, such as like meal plans, housing costs, things like that. talking about the BAH stipend that comes with some of the VA benefits as well. Also talking about, and I experienced this was a little bit of a shock for me when I first started as a student, that the BAH is prorated. So that's, that first BAH payment, it might be significantly less than expected when you are active duty and having that same BAH every month. So we want to ensure that, we never shy away that there are going to be challenges. There are going to be, this transition is not easy as a whole, but we always want to make sure that we're doing every single thing we can to get as far into that as reasonably possible. And that again starts with that immediate interaction as soon as they're admitted. So once they're here on campus, I think that between our team and also our Office of Veterans Benefits Administration, who primarily handles our VA benefits, it is so very, very well versed and so very well trained in being able to carry over this education that any student that walks in the door, hey, I've got this charge, what's going on here? Or I'm not familiar with this. We're able to immediately answer those questions, especially when it's specifically about the VA benefit. But what's really great, physical proximity, and just as well as the opportunity on campus, right beside us is our financial wellness center. So we've physically walked students over there to talk a little bit more detail about, managing that money coming out of active duty. And now finances look a little bit different and what that looks like. We also have a veterans, what we call a Transition 201 course. It's a weekly seminar course where veterans get together and meet. And there's a specific module in that class about financial clarity and financial wellness, not just about the VA benefits, but just overall financial management, whether you have a home, your family, groceries, things like that. And it was funny when we first created that, when the module was set up, it was kind of talking to our vets like, oh, make sure to budget for your cell phone bill and to go out on a Friday night. And we had a quick realization that that's not speaking to our student population. That's more for the traditional student population, but we needed to go a step further and making sure that we're focusing on the needs of our current students. So we started listening to them, hearing about their experiences. A lot of them are adults, considered adult learners, and being able to tailor those specific questions and needs to kind of that demographic. So, I think all in all, from the immediate, as soon as they're admitted, all the way through that first semester and beyond their entire time here, there's so many different avenues for that kind of financial support.
Absolutely. That's wonderful to hear. And I think, what just really, really stuck out is that you asked your students. And I know that sounds silly, but, I can't tell you how many times, you're in conversations, right? And the intention as well, right? The intention is, we have to provide all of these resources, and this is what our student body needs. But no one's ever asked the students, right?
Absolutely.
Is this really what you need? And so I love that. And I think that that's a great takeaway for everybody and anybody who is on our call today. Really lean in on your internal engine, and ask those questions so that you're providing resources that are useful. Question I have around that. So VA benefits can get really complicated, right? Not just with the GI Bill, but you have TA, you have VRNE, sometimes state benefits. So there's a lot of moving parts, and, it's awesome. You have an onboarding course for them to go to and watch over and over again. If you have any best practices or recommendations on certain downloadables or takeaways, or take homes for military and veteran students to help them really get home and digest the key indicators in the process, or helpful hints in the process.
Yeah, I think that, I think, Kevin would probably be able to speak very well, just, his own personal experience coming in. And I think that there's always things that, there's challenges and the surprises and like, oh, I wish I'd have known, or wish I could have known that sooner. But again, understanding those, learning those along the way. So I've been on this campus, first as a student, then as staff for about 10 years now, going on 11. So the shift in the need and the demographic and really just the overall culture of the students' needs has changed dramatically. And really being able to reach out to them, and like we mentioned before, hearing about what they need. But I think that in immediate, initial, early interaction or intervention, however you want to word that, is absolutely critical on so many levels, not just for the financial piece, but just the overall well-being of the student. Coming to school for any student is stressful. It just is. And I've told students, I've met with them at orientation and stuff, and I say it's going to be stressful. That's just a reality. But it's okay because you have such a team, not just from the Veteran Success Center, but across the entire university that's here to support you and understands, your demographic, your culture, spreading that just across campus. So again, I think that immediate intervention, being able to recognize if we reach out to them, we ask, do you know about your benefits? Have you applied for your benefits yet? Do you know what you're interested in? Sometimes we get, no, I haven't even applied yet. Okay, not a problem. Here's the steps we're going to take to go through that. And then understanding, more detail about what this benefit means. And some make, I'm eligible for this, but also I'm interested in VR&E. What does that mean? And then having our team also being able to be well versed. Hey, for VR&E, you qualify based on these reasons. Once you'll need to meet with a counselor. This is how you apply. This is how the process works. This is what will be covered versus what the post 9/11 GI Bill would cover. I think just having that information, that detail as early as possible is absolutely critical. On our website, if you Google University of Tennessee Veterans or UTK Veterans, there's a ton of information on there too. If someone's, they'd rather just kind of go and find the information themselves. I think there's so much VA information out there that it's so overwhelming, and you're getting information from so many different sources. But if we can just narrow that down and find basically, I just need to know what's going to be covered and what's not. We try to make that as straightforward and as streamlined as possible. So I think all in all, just if I was to give any advice to other institutions, I think the earlier the interaction, the intervention, the better. And don't second guess the capabilities of just, it could maybe just one person that's certifying VA benefits, or one person or two people that's there to support vets. And that's okay, because I could probably guarantee that there are a number of people at your institution that are just passionate about helping vets. Bringing them in, having them make phone calls, that initial just, hey, how are you? What can we do to help you? It means so much. And building that team together and creating that initial trust and that connection is going to do, a ton of benefit for the student themselves. And then what we've seen is all the other things just kind of start falling into place once that connection and that trust is built. So.
Absolutely. That brings us right into our next topic, or our next pillar, which is flexibility, right? So we could move on to the next slide. Okay. So this is flexibility. Flexibility is your new currency, right? It is what is going to keep students at your university. And to what Tom said, not everybody has to be an expert in military benefits, right? And so being flexible with your staff is just as important as being flexible with your policy. Someone can be passionate in this space but not know about GI Bill benefits. That doesn't mean that they're not capable of picking up the phone, communicating with another human being, and saying, how can I help you? And if I don't have the answers for you today, I will go find them and I'll bring them back to you. And so when we talk about flexibility in that enrollment process, right, as an advocate for other military students, Kevin, if you could change one thing across every institution in the US, regardless of the resources that they have, right, could be one, could be 10, that could help schools be more flexible, what would that look like? Would it be a checklist? Would it be an on-demand course? Would it be a class? Would it be training? What would that look like to you?
Thank you for that question, Kayla. So what I picture flexibility in this specific case, for example, when I first got to UT, I went to orientation, and there was a moment where the chancellor kind of stood up and said, hey, if you're military affiliated, please stand up. There's a secondary orientation going on. And that's kind of when I got introduced to the Veteran Success Center, the VA work studies that were manning the front desk, the support staff there along with Tom. And we were able to kind of get the full rundown as far as being a military affiliated student. And as much as every veteran's different. Every veteran's gone through different experiences that make them whole. One thing that I personally think that I can kind of credit to my current success here at the University of Tennessee was our Veteran Success Center hosts, like he mentioned, Transition 201, which is otherwise known as VIP Veteran Impact Program, which is something that is, like what he mentioned, a cohort of veterans initially in their first semester, first, second semester, where they gather each week and kind of go over good practices, resources that the university has, support from the VA, guest speakers from the library, other divisions of student success. Um, I when I first wanted to go to college, I felt like I had no support, and just being to have that transition where I got into a location where people actually cared, about their students, about what they're going through and like, what they're dealing with. So I truly believe that if other institutions are able to kind of mirror this, having an opportunity where veterans can all kind of get together, because oftentimes they're going through the same stuff and they don't understand. They don't know what the person to the left or right of them is going through because they're not put into a scenario where they have to grow as a cohort. So, a veteran impact program at multiple different universities, as a 1 or 2 credit course, although it may seem like it's an elective, it truly is transformational as far as getting a veteran acclimated to a university where they don't have any experience at.
Yeah, absolutely. That's so important, right? Showing the students that you care, that they're not just a number, especially when it comes to filing some of these benefits. It can be overwhelming. And, you got to go see this person, and then you got to go see the certifying official, and then you got to go to a different office. So nail on the head, Kevin, institutions having something that just says, hey, we're here for you. And here's what that looks like, right? And showing that there's truly intention to care and sincerity. So Tom, with that said, in the VIP program, you guys hit 96% student retention rate, which is fantastic. So, lots of different universities on this call, right? Some big, some small, some community colleges, some virtual only. And so if you had to give advice to each of these universities on how they would build that program, what are some of the pillars that they can implement quickly, or without maybe they don't have the resources or investment from the university to do that would help the students find success?
I think one of the biggest pieces about the Veteran Impact Program is, on one side is understanding and staying true to what the culture of the military and then that transition out. But outside of that, if I had to pick one word, it would be community. Regardless of if you have tons of dollars and donor funds and all of these things, or you're very, very tight on a small operating budget and you're doing the best you can, and maybe there's not a lot of programming going on, there is always going to be community there among the veteran population. It may not be readily apparent. It could be online. It could be in person. Having the ability to, I think that we're fortunate that being able to, track our vets. I've talked with a lot of schools of having just challenges tracking and finding who their veterans are. Like, where are they? They may have a veteran center, they may not, but just finding those. But there is assurance to know that they're there and that community is there. Once you have an ability to start, whether you're looking at creating just a student veteran group, like an SVA chapter at your institution, or something similar to a larger area like the Veteran Impact Program, and creating those cohorts and maybe making specific classes, bringing that community together is such a transformational experience for you as staff, of those who support, but also for the students as well. I mean, I just met with a student this morning that he told me, he said, that specific class, he said, that's where I've met my best friends. Like, I would have known nobody without that. And that ability to create that community in whatever setting you may be in, that opportunity is always going to be there, no matter what. If you have 2 veterans, at minimum at your institution, that community opportunity is there. I'm fully aware, easier said than done. Where we are today at the University of Tennessee, it did not happen overnight. It took a lot of interaction. It took a lot of culture change at the end. We had to change the culture of the institution with faculty, with staff, with, we do green zone trainings across the university, online or in person, to just change that culture, to really understand that, we're not asking to put this population up on a pedestal and, thank you for your service every Veterans Day, but this is a day-to-day, interaction. This is a culture change. And I think being able to, start that culture change, other students will see that. Other students will say, wow, I feel that support. I feel that connection. But as you're doing that, that's a lot more of a slow build, but building that community, for me, I think that's where it starts.
Absolutely. Training is so important. One of the conversation that I have often with institutions looks at the DoD complaint system, right? And that is a huge sticking point for military friendly. So we take those seriously, and they do go into qualifications, ratings, rankings, and are part of your score. So we get some institutions that say, "Oh, well, that was not our fault. That out of our control. That's because that's how the VA works." And that may or may not be the case, right? But is it truly that the complaint was filed because there was an issue with the program, or was it because the student wasn't educated on those benefits? And so they're turning the complaint into the DoD on behalf of the university, not knowing that that's a protocol within the benefits. So when it comes to the training that you implement, what suggestions do you have for our audience on sort of the top 3 things that, were instrumental when changing your culture that you had to educate the staff?
I think, the number one was just the overall, learning about the culture. There's one slide, when I've done the training, it says, who is a student veteran? And, it goes into this diverse amount of information, different branches, different ages, race, gender, different occupational goals, different career goals. It's crazy to see when you research and study the veteran population, that how diverse this population really is. And it makes it difficult to find, like, okay, we've got such diversity. How do we narrow this in to support everyone when we've got so many different directions? And that's kind of where the training starts. Like, okay, now what? Where do we go? But then you start finding commonalities among these. There's commonalities among the ages. There's commonalities just among military culture and that experience. There's commonalities just among the overall transition. I think that within the training, PTSD is mentioned specifically about what it is, what it truly means. But it's also based on research saying, PTSD, not every service member may experience PTSD. And there's specific research that's saying, while it's extremely important, it's there because it absolutely exists in this population and it's absolutely never discredited. But a starting point is to ensure that you're supporting the overall transition of the student, from helping them understand the finances, helping them understand what their classes mean, understand that certain situations may be a little bit more different, maybe a little bit more overwhelming. Just overall mental health, that's a little different. And I think that the biggest culture change we saw was with student interactions with faculty on campus and how they interact in the classroom. We just talked with some faculty a couple of days ago. There was a student that had some challenges that he needed to step away from the day. Fortunately, our academic coaches make connections with that professor, looping in the student. Fully understood, absolutely understood. Let us help. Let us be flexible. One professor even was willing to, reschedule an exam for that day. Again, not always it's going to be a uniform across the board process. However, that didn't happen overnight. 5-10 years ago, that conversation, we wouldn't even thought of even to reach out to do that. But being able to change that culture, letting them really understand and experience, okay, there's a little bit more to this than they just happen to be in the military. That's really where it started. And staying consistent. We could have done a green zone in 2021 and said, okay, we're good. We checked the box. Or do you want a year? That's not, we in institutions in higher education, come and go. We see faculty come and go. We see advisors. All the institution is constantly revolving across the board. And new people are coming in, different changes, different leadership, things like that. This has to stay consistent. The education has to be at the forefront. Being willing to, drop what you're doing and say, hey, if you have a group of advisors, hey, we'd love to learn more about student veterans in our college. That's always a priority for me. If someone reaches out and they want to learn more, you tell me when and where, and I'm there, because it's that important to continue and make consistent that cultural awareness for these students, that if you don't stay consistent on that, at least on the forefront, it's going to become more of a challenge as things arise.
Absolutely. You brought up PTSD, and normally I wouldn't really go into this, but I think it's important to talk about, right?
Yeah.
Um, I think there is a public perception, right, that
Mhm.
everybody who serves in the military has PTSD, right? And only veterans have, that's only something that the military faces. And so I think sometimes that can be a bit exhausting to an individual when you see, oh, PTSD resources. Oh, someone brings that up.
Mhm.
And so looking at how universities approach that in a different way, right? PTSD is not just for the military, right? If you fall off your
Mhm.
bike and then you're scared to get back on a bike, you've got PTSD from a bike, right? So
Sure.
it's not that that term is specific to the military and veteran population. Does it exist? Absolutely. Are there resources that need to be there? Yes. But is that solely for PTSD, or is it really student wellness, overall student wellness, right? Or a holistic approach to student success? And so when you look at that, how do you implement resources or wellness programs at your institution so that students feel comfortable raising their hand and saying, I will participate?
Yeah, and I mean that challenge, we'll have organizations that are interested in, hosting like a workshop for suicide awareness and different things like that. And it's a difficult conversation. It is because, as hard of a reality it is to accept, that's real. PTSD is real. Veteran suicide rates are real, and it's not okay. And we want to make sure that we're doing absolutely everything we can to circumvent that, to get in front of that, to be able to say, we're here for you, we support you. If there's something we can't directly provide, we know exactly how to support that, whether it's a student is in crisis and we are walking them directly to the student counseling center, making sure they get directly there where they need, that's real and that exists. But going off of experience as well as several different areas of research, starting with that, every single one of us, whether if you were in the military and then you're no longer in the military, you experience transition, whether it was easy, whether it was extremely difficult, or whether I navigated on management. That is a reality. We know across the board, if you military, exit military, the transition is there. There is a level of transition experience that's going to be fairly common across the board. Because we know that that's going to be common across all of our service members, either now or at some point, that's where you want to focus. That's where you want to help that overall transition, making sure that feeling of connection, feeling of isolation is supported, making sure that you're engaging with these students. A lot of I mean, I would be the first to admit this is a challenging population. It is. It sometimes, some days are harder than others, but that intentional engagement, just knowing that, hey, you have a face here. Somebody could have we've had so many students that had a great time in the military. They were so happy that that's who they were. And then they come here and they're out of that and they have no idea who they are. That identity shift, renegotiating that identity is so powerful. So, and while that PTSD, those experiences may be scattered throughout there, being able to approach that from a transitional point and saying, let's start here and start working forward. Post-traumatic growth has been seen to come out of, those specific situations, not directly seeing, oh, you have PTSD. Oh, let's go to therapy. We need to talk about these things right now. But the overall direct, like, hey, come to one of our tailgates, come have a cup of coffee with us. Let's just talk about how are you doing today. That initial approach, it doesn't have to be so daunting and scary. You don't have to be a professional counselor to just make that initial outreach. And again, back to that, soon as we make those phone calls and things at admissions, that's really when it starts, because it's hard to tell where that student may be in that mindset, not to mention when they get here. So that early intervention, that direct approach of just getting them engaged, getting them connected, alleviating that feeling of isolation is going to do wonders.
Absolutely. Raising your hand and saying, I need help is hard, right? But
Yeah.
joining in a conversation or being part of a community makes that a lot easier.
Yeah.
Kevin, in your
Making
experience,
those opportunities there too.
yeah, exactly. Yep. Kevin, do you have any feedback on it?
Yes. So when I got out of the military, going through the VA process, ultimately I was paired up with America's Vet Dogs for a service animal. And I felt for the longest time just insecurity of what people would think of someone who would be a service dog handler. And that's oftentimes what a lot of them kind of think. And, when I was coming to the University of Tennessee, I was nervous that, people would make assumptions or, not want to get to know me just because of, you know, you were mentioning it earlier, but like the overarching thought that every veteran has PTSD and that, it causes them to have things that may not go in line with personality. So I never had that issue when I got through the doors. I was welcomed with open arms, with empathy and respect, and true care. One of the most influential moments that I came through was there was a VA work study at the Veteran Success Center. His name was Matt. He also had a service animal, and that made me comfortable to be myself. And it kind of just showed me how do you be a handler in college? How do you manage, the day to day? And he did it with just professionalism, and he helped me through the VA process when I was trying to learn how to be a VA work study myself. So um, I felt like I had all the support I needed at that time. The university does a lot as far as wellness, not only through the academic coaches that the Veteran Success Center provides to students with appointment needs as well, but they also do tailgate wellness checks where veterans can come in, enjoy some food, hang out with community, and that's stuff that really brings people in. So I've felt like I've been supported throughout the entire process, and there's very clear transparency with what the school can offer in the Veteran Success Center.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. You mentioned earlier before this even webinar started, we were talking um, about how impactful your journey with Tom and some of the staff at the university was, and you feeling embraced, and feeling a part of that community right off the bat. And that stuck with me, right? So for all of you universities out there, make it a point, right, to go that extra mile. Make it a point to let those students be seen, right? And let them know that you truly, genuinely care about their student success and that you are flexible in providing what it is that they need to be successful. Appreciate you guys. That was a hard one, right? So pillar 3. All right. So this is removing barriers. So this is talking about some of the policy stuff, right? And how we get past some of that in order to create some of that flexibility. So 98% of our military-friendly schools provide a grace period between VA payments because of delays, right? And that could be for other reasons. While I have seen some institutions that are very rigid about that process, I have seen others that are very flexible. And so with that being said, University of Tennessee, how do you guys handle some of those payment grace periods? Do you have policies in place? What does that procedure look like? Is there internal training?
Yeah, I think that one really benefit between especially our Veterans Benefits Administration office and the bursar's office is that clear communication between the two. That when it just in initially any student that's using a VA benefit at any point will be initially placed on a veterans deferment plan. So that allows the VA time to come in, make their payments in case there's any delays, and there's no penalty at all to the student. But in addition to not just the VA, that also allows the student time to be able to pay anything additional, like those meal plans or different things like that, and give them time to make that versus needing to have that upfront a week before classes start or the first day of classes. So there is significant, grace periods and significant deferments there for the students' finances to be able to know, and it really helps too to say, we can say all day, doesn't cover meal plans, doesn't cover housing, things like that. But when they actually can see it and where the VA will come in and pay their portion and, okay, now I know exactly this is what I've got left. And then being able to kind of finance budget around that is really benefit too, without having to fork over a whole bunch of money immediately before they know for sure. And that also comes from, working with our financial wellness coaches and things like that to be able to know be better educated about that on the front end. But being able to have that cushion of time has been really beneficial. I think too, as well, when it comes to deployments, this is a university, a collaborative initiative. It can't be just from us. When students come to us and say, "Hey, I just got short-term orders. I'm going to deploy mid-semester, or it's the middle of semester. Hey, I've got to leave in 2 weeks. What do I do?" That immediately starts a communication process between us, the Veterans Benefits Office, the bursar's office, our admissions counselors. All these different areas immediately start communicating with one another, knowing this is when the student's leaving, and also the faculty that this classes the student may be in. Reaching out to the faculty, talking with them. We have a specific military absence policy to where there are minimum requirements that faculty, as well as the financial piece, they're required to do to be able to support this student. And that is making sure that they don't receive a failing grade, they're not penalized financially, there's no negative impacts. And when they do return to the university, they don't have to repay an application fee. They don't have to pay anything to come back. They're basically, their enrollment's on hold until they're ready to come back and they've successfully completed whatever training and services they had. So I think those are the two major ones that really, I've benefited from it myself as a student, and just really navigating. There's some situations that pop up frequently. Maybe a student would unfortunately maybe need to withdraw from a course, or things like that maybe create a financial penalty with the VA or things like that. Educating the student about what that means, if there's any financial penalty when it comes to what they would maybe owe back to the institution, if that would come to be, being able to have a good conversation with our bursar's office, letting them know the situation. And they've always been very flexible in helping us kind of navigate, helping that with the student. We also have emergency assistance funds that are reserved for students that may be in a situation to where their car breaks down, or they need a new battery and they just can't afford a $300 battery for their car. Different life situations that they can apply for emergency funds to be able to help them, financially there as well. So I think those are probably the two, largest pieces that really I think are very helpful from the financial piece on those barriers.
Yeah, absolutely. And depending on what state some of the schools that are attending today are in, there are also state programs. So if your university doesn't have the resources to have an emergency fund, some states do offer those emergency funds for student veterans or students who are in the Guard. Now, I'll keep this brief, but I've had a lot of conversations over the years with universities that say, we have that deployment safety net. And as you just mentioned, when it comes up, you reach out, right, and tell them.
Yes.
So important. I can't tell you how many of those conversations have been what the student just doesn't come back, right? Well, why didn't they come back? Did they know they could come back?
Mm-hmm.
Or did they leave saying, oh, well, I had to deploy, I didn't really have a choice. So, I'll get back to school in a few years later when I get back. But primarily because they didn't know that there was no penalty, right?
Sure.
Or that those policies were in place. So what you're doing is outstanding, but I can tell you it's not the norm across most schools, right? And so for those of you guys out there that are not doing that, it is critical for retention to educate those students on what's available to them and what that looks like if they have to take a leave or need emergency funding. All right, and I think we're coming up on time. I think we got one more slide we can bounce into. Oh, this is my favorite, the formal complaint process. Super important. I know it sounds daunting, but having a process in place where students can express concern or complaints in an easy, formalized way, right? So that it's structured and the same for everybody. Having a student complaint portal within your student CRM system or on your website if someone wants to do it anonymously, right? If it's a complaint about a professor, but they don't want to put their name on there. You've got to have a way to be flexible, but also a process in place to address the issues that may come up with those students so that they don't progress into DoD complaints or to complaints at a higher level. And so at UT, I'd love to hear how you guys handle your student feedback. And we'll start with Kevin.
Thank you. I've always had a very clear impression when it comes to issues that are affecting directly a student here at the university, that they're always more than welcome to bring it up to staff if they need it. We have a full VBA team that deals specifically with VA issues. Although they do a lot with admissions and making sure everyone's up to date with their enrollment certification forms. They're oftentimes advocates for the students as well. They're able to clearly talk to them about VA. We have the VA representatives coming in monthly to our center and having workshops where students can go directly to talk to them about anything that would be affecting them. Um, you know, Tom, the director, Erica, the vice director, and all the other staff at the Veteran Success Center, they oftentimes have their doors open, if they're not in a meeting or if they're not working on something for the university, their doors are open. Students are eligible to come in there and talk one-on-one, and oftentimes completely negate having to go through a formal process. I've always found that to be extremely helpful. And even as a VA work study in the last 2 years, when I was working at the Veteran Success Center, peer-to-peer opportunities where people would come to the front desk, they would have an issue or something, and me and my other work studies would be able to kind of find the answer for them right then and there, either using the resources that we've learned through the training or going and talking to the Veteran Success Center or VBA staff. I just found that, it truly is an open door policy. I know that there's a formal complaint procedure with the university and the Veteran Success Center, but oftentimes it gets stopped right at the door and addressed. So I've never had an issue with it. I know other veterans, if they have issues, they just bring it up, and they've oftentimes had it.
That's awesome. That's a unique situation, right? You guys have your program nailed down. And students feel so welcome coming in because of the experience and culture that you've created. That's not the same at every institution. So you guys are truly doing some awesome stuff over there at UT. In closing, last question for you guys would be for Tom, right? Let's say you were not at UT and you were at another university and you had to start this all over again, right? And you didn't have the resources, you didn't have the culture. How could you use a student complaint system to better the environment or to help sort of create that culture? Or how would you see this working if you were at a university that was just kind of starting off, didn't really have a formalized program in place, and kind of were not in as blessed of a situation as UT is?
Yeah, and I think that, and it's amazing just to look back and just talk about all these amazing things. But I think the most important topic to take away from that is, again, this did not happen overnight. This has been a very long, slow build for many years, even years before I was here at UT. It doesn't happen overnight. So I think if I was to start in a brand new institution, going back to that idea that no matter where someone may be, that understanding that community is there. You just have to go and seek it out. Sometimes that's harder than other times, but the community is there and that opportunity is there to seek it out. Whether, diving into if there is a formal complaint process to see what students are saying, or having the ability to kind of pinpoint your student population and reaching out and just saying, hey, let's have a coffee. Let's get together. I will be in this area from 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. Let's have a mini town hall. Let's come just chat. You need to hear about what your students are experiencing. Say you were a student 10 years ago at the same institution. I can't fully, but I can almost guarantee that the veteran that you were there with in 2015 is much different than the veteran today. This culture over the last 10 years, and I say 10 years because that's how long I've been here, has changed significantly. Gone are the days our veterans that they come to school, they go to class, they go home. Our students particularly, they're wanting that college experience. They're wanting to be integrated into the university. They want to know what it means to be a volunteer. And we've had to shift that. We've had to go from kind of isolating or siloing certain programs because that's kind of what was expected, to now more integration into the university, more connection, more collaboration across campus. And we had to do that because that's what the student needed. And we knew that because they told us, because we asked. So any way to gather that community, to do that outreach, just to hear where they are, their needs, wants, desires, dreaming big, never hesitate to dream big, but also understand that patience is important because again, it does not happen overnight, but absolutely starting with who's here and who can I build that trust with to start that communication.
Absolutely. So important. Having those independent events is great, right? And most universities think that's the way to do it. We're going to have a military and veteran event only, right? But that does not do any justice for integrating into the student population. But had you have not asked your students, you probably wouldn't have known that. So
Right.
that's great insight and great feedback. Big thank you to you guys for taking some time with us today. Walking through your program and sharing best practices with us and telling us about your experience, and how you've used that to create a better environment for other student veterans and military within the institution. So for all of you out there that are ready to explore more options with memberships with Military Friendly, we are dedicated to providing resources to you to help you improve your program, as well as to help you market your institution to other military students who may be a good fit. So you can scan that QR code right there, get set up with one of our account managers, and have a discussion on how we may be able to help you. Big thank you again to Tom and Kevin for joining us today. Your insight was tremendous, and we appreciate you so much. Keep up the amazing work that you are doing over at UT.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having us.
Thank you. I appreciate being part of the Military Friendly family.
We appreciate you, Kevin. And Tom Cruise, the good Tom Cruise.
That's me.
All right, go ahead and scan that QR code. Thank you guys for joining us today. We hope that you found the information on today's webinar helpful. And for more resources, you can go ahead and click on militaryfriendly.com into the school section on the guide, or you can go ahead and scan that QR code to talk to one of us. Hope you guys have a wonderful day, and thanks again for joining us. See you on the next one.